All right, thank you. Everyone can hear me? Thank you very much. I'm just so happy. This is my first time in Mexico City. So thanks to Andreas for giving me the opportunity to talk at NS Coder Mexico. And a lot of people actually helped me to come over here and tell me like different things I can do in Mexico City. Daira, who I think you already met, Fabiola, Wendy, they all really helped me to basically come to Mexico City and basically kind of support me like a family, right? So today's topic is taming the massive controller, and a little bit of introduction about myself. I work for Iron Yard and I teach. So Iron Yard is the world's largest boot camp. People come with little or no programming experience, and in 12 weeks we basically teach them everything they need to know to become a junior developer. So I teach only iOS over there. I also teach on Udemy on Instructor. Udemy is a website where you can watch the videos. So I sell my courses over there also. Before joining Iron Yard, I have worked with many large companies in Houston, obviously. Valak, AIG, Schlumberger, Baker Hughes, Home Depot, Blinds.com, and so on. So this is Iron Yard. I mean, it's because of Iron Yard that I'm actually over here. So it's really nice for them to support me and send me over here. I have a lot of apps on the App Store. This is one of my first app released in 2010. And after that, I did a little bit of games. But then after working with games, I got tired and I created a gardening app, which was also featured by Apple on the App Store. So let's get to the topic of massive controller. We all know that the iOS development, whether you're building a very small app or large app, depends on a design pattern MVC, model view controller, right? And in the end, what happens is a lot of code that you write ends up in the view controller itself. And it can be like 300, 400, 500 lines of code. So I'm going to show you some small techniques that you can use to move the code into right places. Massive view controllers, or making sure the code is small, doesn't really convey the message that it's about lines of code. It's not really about lines of code. If you have 300 lines in your view controller and 70 lines, it's not about that. It's more about putting things in their right places, all right? So even though I'm going to show you extremely simple app, and it might be 120 lines of code or 150 lines of code, and we will, after I clean up all the code, we will still have 70 to 80 lines. But then you will see that it will, everything is in place, all right? So we always start with like this, right? Our view controller, very simple, but then after that we start adding code to it, and our view controller start data access tasks or web service tasks, and it just goes on and on and on and on, and it becomes extremely hard to maintain, not only for you, but also for your fellow developers, your other people in the group. And as time goes on and on, you will see that your view controller just becomes 500, 600, 700 lines of code. And you can come back to it the next day or the next week and you'll be like, I don't know what I was doing. I mean, how did we end up with 1,000 lines of code, right? And you become depressed. Basically, this is what happens after that, right? So it happened because we did not care about the code that we wrote when we were writing, and we were always thinking that, oh, don't worry, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll fix it. But that never happens. If you start something bad, you never come back to fix it. So let's see some of the things that we can learn about view controllers, all right? So I have already a small app that I have. All right. Is that too big font, or is that okay? Okay. So let me actually first run the app so you'll have a better idea what it does. It's a very simple app. It's a to-do list, it's a grocery list. So basically you can add your, let me actually make this a little bit larger. Okay, so here's the app. You can add shopping list. Let's say you buy your groceries from Walmart, but you buy your fruit from Fiesta, but you buy from your bread from a bakery. So there are 3 different shopping lists. So let me add one shopping list. Just add the shopping list. Nothing much. Not much doing, right? Right. But look at the code that I had to type to achieve that. All the shopping lists are being saved in a core data, using core data into SQLite database. So this is my shopping list table view controller, and let me actually show you the storyboard because it's, as you can expect, it's really simple. Shopping list. You click on a shopping list, it goes to grocery items. We're not going to implement that, but it just goes over there. But look at the shopping list view controller. And some of you might say that, okay, this is also some of the code that I wrote, right? We have a shopping list which is of type table view controller. We have setting up of the whole core data stack right here inside your view controller, right? So all this code is simply setting up the core data stack. It's setting up core data with SQLite. Then we have also fetching the data from the database. So we are using NS fetch results controller right over here, and we have delegate methods of that over here. Okay. Still, it's the same view controller. It's not in a different file, different class, same view controller. Then we have these methods that you are very aware of: number of rows in section, number of sections for table view, cell for row at index path, right? If I run my app and you see the box at the top where I can enter, that is the view for header. So if I could look at this portion over here, just the text box is coming from over here. So if I want to use the same layout in a different screen, I have to copy paste this code again and again and again and again, right? So let's see how can we fix some of these things, all right? Let's start with the basic thing. Initializing core data. That's a lot of code in a view controller. Maybe we can put it somewhere else, right? So what I have done is I took all the code, created something called Core Data Manager. The Core Data Manager, the whole purpose of Core Data Manager is just to initialize core data stack. And it has to be done only once. So in the app delegate file, did finish launching with options, we simply make the core data object and we fire initialize core data stack, and we pass the manage object context to the shopping table view controller. All right, that means that I can go over here and simply delete all of that. It's gone. So we are on our way of making our view controller smaller, right? Now since this is gone, we don't need to call this anymore. It's gone also. But let's go ahead and run our application to see that if we have deleted this code, does it even work now? Okay, so I'm going to run this and I'm going to say whatever, organic. Everything works just fine, right? Now I'm going to look again to my shopping list table view controller and see where else I can remove the stuff and move it around. All right. The biggest one that comes is this fetch results controller. And fetch results controller is part of the UI kit, basically the Apple framework, which is responsible for fetching the data from the core data and giving it to the table view. But that is not a good place to be writing fetch results controller. All right. So I'm going to remove that and see if I can substitute with something else. So I already have something called shopping list data provider. Okay. Now shopping list data provider is responsible for fetching the data from the database and giving it to whoever is needed, in this case table view, right? So if I want to use that, I'm simply going to go and create an object of that, shopping list data provider, which is of type shopping list data provider, right? And then in populate shopping list, I can simply initialize it, shopping list data provider, shopping list data provider, and I can simply pass in manage object context. All right. So this means shopping list data provider is responsible for fetching the data from the SQLite database. That means I don't want to use this anymore, so I can remove that. If I'm not using that, I don't want to use this also, because this was fetching the data. So now shopping list data provider is fetching the data. I don't want that, so that's gone. If that is gone, then the delegate methods of NS fetch results controller is also gone, because we are not handling data over there. Okay, and if that is gone, we don't need to use this guy, so that is also gone. But now our application is of course not working. If I run it, it's not going to do anything, because I have removed basically everything from it, right? So let's build it, and now it's complaining that I have used something called fetch results controller inside number of sections. So how can I move these things? Number of sections over here, and cell for row at index path. All right. If I can move these into some other designated place, then I can use it later on also. And it will not put code in the view controller. I will put it somewhere else. So for that, I have created something called shopping list data source. And this shopping list data source conforms to something called UI table view data source. So that means all those methods that you saw, number of sections, number of rows, number of sections, and number or cell for row at index path are now part of the shopping list data source. So let me go ahead and remove that from over here. So I don't need that over here. I don't need this over here, and I don't need this one. But we have not created shopping list data source. So let's go ahead and do that also. So var shopping list data source, shopping list data source, and now I can initialize it, self dot shopping list data source, shopping list data source, and it takes a lot of arguments. The first argument is the identifier for the cell that you're displaying. So that is shopping list table view cell, and you can read about it over here. If I go to the storyboard and click on the cell, here it is, shopping list table view cell. So now I can go back and start filling out other parameters. It's table view, which is self.tableview, because I'm inside the UI table view controller. Who is responsible for fetching the data? That is the provider. So self.shopping list provider. And this is really what I really like about the cell configuration. You want to configure your cell. You want to change the color of your cell. You want to assign some text to your cell. That I have created a block or a closure that is responsible for doing that. So this closure is going to pass you a cell. So over here will be a cell, and this will be a shopping list. And now I can write some code over here, cell dot text label dot text equals to shopping list dot title. If you want to change the background color of the cell, I can also do that. So anything that you want to do to configure the cell, I can do it over here inside the block or closure. But I haven't still not assigned this table shopping list data source to the data source of the table view. So I can assign something like this, table view dot data source equals to self dot shopping list data source. I think now it should work. Everything is set up. So remember all those methods. This one, number of rows in section. Number of rows in section, number of section, and cell for row at index path. That were part of the table view controller, but we have deleted that from over there. And now our view controller is a little bit more simpler, as you can see. It doesn't have those methods over here. Much cleaner. So let's run this and see if it actually works. Okay, so you can see the title came back and now the background color is different. Let's see if the addition works. Addition also works just fine. So we are on our way of making code much smaller, right? So let's move to something else now. What about this code? Right? So all of this code, what it does is create that header, just one small row, which is right over here. So if I run this, only this portion, as you can see, right? You have a text box, and that's pretty much it. You just have a text box, right? But what about if I click on this? It goes to the grocery items like apple, cookies, chips. Well, let me select a different grocery. Let's say Fiesta. And I want to display what I want to buy from Fiesta. And I want to add the items. If I want to add the items, I want this control. So what should I do? I should copy this and paste it in different view controller, but that's going to be repeating code, right? So how can we improve this? So what I have done is I created a separate user control, add new item, that is responsible for creating the text box, right? So if I want to use that, I will simply say add new item view, add new item view, and I can pass in anything I want. So I can pass in enter shopping list, some sort of a frame, x is 0, y is 0, width is self dot table view dot frame dot size dot width, and height is 44. And once you select the item, it will pass it as a closure again. So I will get the text over here and I can print it, this, right? Now this is a whole control, so I can simply return it over here. Not this, return add new item view, this one. And guess what? I don't need this anymore, it's gone. Much simpler, and it's also reusable. This one. And this. Okay? Let's go ahead and run it, and you'll see that the text box remains the same. But now it's much easier to create. The text box is there still. If I type over here, you will see that it prints out over here, right? But I don't want to print out, I want to add it to the database. So let's see how we were adding to the database previously. we were doing this. We were capturing whenever the user presses on the return key, we add it to the database. Okay, that sounds simple enough, so I can create some sort of a private method and call it add new shopping list. I can pass in the title of the shopping list, and I can copy all this code. There we go. First, let me go ahead and delete this one because we're not using text box anymore, and we can delete the delegate also. Okay, so this is add new shopping list. It's going to get the title. I can replace this with title, and there is no such thing as text field anymore. We can delete that, and we don't need to do that, and we don't need to do that. All right. So what's going on is now we have to call add new shopping list whenever we press a return key, which is right over here. So I can say self.add new shopping list and pass in the text. So this is going to call this guy, and this is going to insert just like it was inserting before. But there's a problem, right? If you see this line, this is way too long to type, and this is also, I can make a mistake. I can call like this, and it's not going to work because there is no entity called shopping list, and it finds the entity over here in the core data shopping list. So if I call it differently, then it will not work, obviously, right? So this error can happen, and if it happens, it might take a while to figure it out what's going on. And it's also too long. It's a very long line to write. All right. And then we are using over here what we call a key and a value, right? This can also be messed up. Like I can say over here accidentally, and then it's not going to work. So how can we make it much better? So how about considering let shopping list equals to self.manageObjectContext.insert object. Now, if you open your Xcode right now and start typing this, there is no such thing as insert object, right? Because this is a, let me do this. This is a extension method that I created, which is somewhere over here. Really nice, really simple extension method, which takes in a generic type and it returns you a generic type of object after creating it. So this is really, really helpful. And behind the scenes it does the same thing, but it's doing it in a different way, in a much better way. So I don't need to write these lines anymore. And I can simply say shopping list.title equals to title. Right? Much nicer. But of course, if you're using iOS 10, then you can simply say also shopping list equals to shopping list, and you can pass in the context. This is even nicer than what I did. And this is going to create a shopping list object. All right, so this is for iOS 10. But if you are working with iOS 9 or 8 using Swift, because I'm extending this particular class, ManageObjectContext class, which is, where do you go? Oh, this class over here. So it's only available if you are using Swift and you're extending it. Let's go ahead and run this. I think we can delete this one. This is automatically added. So let's go ahead and run this and see if it adds a new item. So let's say new item. This adds it. Here it is at the bottom. So it still works. That's good. And one thing you will notice is that we started with maybe 150 lines of code. Now it's down to 69 or 70 lines, but it's not really about the lines, number of lines. Okay, it's more about putting the things in the right place, right? So our mission is not really to, okay, this is 150 lines, we wanted to get it into 30 lines. Now that's not going to work, but we want to put all of these things into places where we can reuse them again, again, and again, and again. And one of the examples you have already seen is the top control with a text box. We have extracted it out, we have taken it out, this one. And now if I want to use this over here, I can simply use this one, add new item view, and it will still work. Right? Any question at this point? I know it's a little bit going fast, I guess.
Delegates of text box, FM1 now in your UI class?
So yes, so the delegate of the text.
In this case, but not always, right?
Yeah, so the delegate of the text box is what's going on is firing a closure, and then it passes the text that you type using a closure, and that's how I get the text. Yeah.
Because you're only using one delegate?
I'm using only one delegate, yes. If you're using multiple delegates, then you might have different closures, or that you have to rethink the whole solution. Yes.
You're also using a closure for the cell?
For the cell, yes. Let me see where that is.
You need that, right? Because you're doing the same thing, so you could have that in your class as well.
Which one?
The one where you...
Here we are in the shopping list data source.
Where you specifically pass the cell to your database. That's what...
Shopping list table view controller is right here. Yeah.
Do you need this closure?
Hmm?
Do you need this closure?
It's basically allowing the table view to set it up. One other technique you can use is if you can move into a completely separate cell and you can call a configure method on the cell itself. Yeah, you can do that also. Yeah. The thing I learned from using closure is sometimes I want to reuse a cell. So if I was passing, if I was passing like a particular cell, then I was not able to reuse it correctly or in a different way, just for hacking, not for like a production thing. So that's why I always try to use like a closure to pass in. But yes, that's a good question, because if you are setting up a lot of stuff over here, then again, right, you are adding way too many lines in the table view controller. And maybe it's a good idea to move it into a separate custom class which inherits from UI table view cell and completely separate.
You can do it inside of the constructor, right?
Inside the constructor?
Instantiate the cell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can instantiate the cell. This is only adding values to the cell, like these kind of things, like shopping list title, date, time, number of shopping items, and so on. Yeah. Yeah. But immediately after creating this, you will notice a problem, right? This is, let me run this. Here we go. This is the shopping list screen. We have created shopping list data provider, and we have created shopping list data source. If I click on this, it goes to a separate screen, completely different screen, different view controller. Let's call it grocery items table view controller. So does that mean I have to create grocery items data provider, grocery item data source. Guess what? They will have exactly the same code, exactly the same. The only thing that will change is grocery item over here and grocery item over here and things like that. So this is good, but it's not good enough. This solution is much better than the last one, but we want to completely make a generic table view source that doesn't know about shopping list, whatever the cell is. It should just work, right? So let's create that. So if I say over here private var data source and table view data source. See, I'm not saying shopping list data source, grocery item table source. I'm just saying table view data source. This data source is going to work with the table view itself. And this is of course a custom class. If I go over there, you will see that you have to pass in the cell and you have to pass in the model, like the shopping list or the grocery item. So I can go over here and pass in, I think mine is called UI table view cell, and this is shopping list. And guess what? If I go to a different screen, I can call grocery item, right? But right now we only have shopping list. But what about the data provider, the person who is responsible for fetching the data using core data from SQLite? We also have a private version of that. So I can simply say data provider, and this is fetch results provider. And let's see what model. It only takes a model as a generic type. So I can pass in, I want to fetch shopping list, right? So now we have data provider and we have data source. We don't need these anymore. We don't need these. We never really use that. We still have to initialize it. So let's go ahead and initialize it. Self.data source equals to, well, first the data provider equals to fetch results provider. For some reason you see the constructor doesn't work. I have to manually populate this. It's a bug in Swift, I think. So let's go ahead and do that. So pass in the manage object context, manage object, there we go. Our data provider is initialized, but we still need to initialize our data source. Once again, this data source is completely generic. It does not depend on a shopping list. It does not depend on type of a cell. It can work with shopping list, grocery item, customer, whatever. All right. So let's go ahead and initialize our data source, and I can say table view data source. Once again, the initializer is not working, so let me jump in over here, and this has a lot of arguments, as you can see, and I have to manually enter those. The cell identifier is shopping list table view cell. We already know that. We need the table view, so I'm going to pass in the table view. We need the provider. We have already initialized a provider, which is data provider. And we need once again, the closure that will configure the cell. Since this is the last argument, I can mostly pass in like this as a trailing closure. Let's see if that works. Now it's complaining about that. We don't need these anymore because we have created a generic solution. And this will become data source. Let's go ahead and build it. It builds correctly, and if you run it, let's see if we run it. Okay, so it displays. So now I can actually go and decorate it. Cell dot text label dot text equals to model dot title, and cell dot background color equals to whichever color you want. Here we go. And there we go. We got all our items. Let's go ahead and see if it adds. And it adds also, right? So I think this is much better solution, at least for right now, right? Now, one question for you to take home and think about it is which solution is a better one? Creating separate shopping list data source, shopping list table provider, grocery items tables source, grocery item data provider, or using completely generic versions of both things, data provider and the data source. It really depends on type of the app that you're writing. Once you are saying that everything is generic, you sometime will be very in the corner, like you will say that, okay, I can't work with this anymore when it's completely generic. Sometimes you have to tweak a little bit over here, a little bit over there. It can be done, but it's a little bit challenging, right? But in our simple application, we can definitely use a generic version which doesn't depend on any type, which does not know any type, which does not depend on any a cell. So I can pass in whatever cell I want. I can pass in grocery item table view cell, and I can pass in grocery item. It's generic, so it doesn't really matter, right? So these are the two solutions that you can start implementing in your application. The last thing I think we already know is the segues when you pass in stuff. So we don't even have a segue. So if you say, where is that? Prepare for segue, right? If segue.identifier equals to grocery items, then you write code over here, right? You can even make it much better, write code in a separate, completely separate function, or I have been using this guy, which is segue handler, which allows you to, it allows you to create enumerated types so you can pass from segue. So if I go over here and I make sure that I'm using that segue handler type, segue identifier, so I can create an enum, I believe, over here, and I can say case grocery items equals to grocery items. I believe that should be okay. Let's see. Segue does not conform to it. I might be missing some method over here. Oops. Where is it? Oh, this is it. So segue identifier raw representable. Yeah, I won't go into that. Let's go back over here. Yeah. I don't know why it's not working with that. Yeah, but that is another way of doing that. It doesn't gain that much. You won't gain that much, but what will happen is that the segue identifier will make sure that you are only using segues in places where the controller is basically conforming to the protocol. But from our discussion, the most important points are to moving the data source and the data providers, right? I think that's pretty much it. Let me actually go back to over here. All right. So the repository for this, all the code that I typed, is basically over here, and I'll post a link. All right. And this is just like a start for taming your massive controllers. You can create, really, I mean, you can tame or you can write better code pretty much everywhere in the application, not like only related to table view controllers. One of the things is web services. When you request web services, the old way of doing things in Objective-C was to use a success callback and a failure callback, but now you can create closures which doesn't depend on these success or failures. Here's my contact, azamsharp.com, azamsharp@gmail.com, and I'm on Twitter at azamsharp, right? And that's pretty much it for at least for the first presentation. Any questions? Yes.
About the presentation, I think that a better way to understand all the things that you've done is for developers that have some experience.
Yeah, yeah.
So, in your opinion, you have worked in the good company. These techniques can be taught to the new developers?
No, I wouldn't teach that to new developers, because if you even if you're a new developer, even if you go online and you say how to populate a table view, they write all the code in the table view controller, because they're not teaching you how to write really compact, really reusable code. They're just teaching you how to populate a table view, how to put data in the table view. This will take like time, you know, once you're building large apps, it takes like a lot of time to understand what's going on and all those things. One resource, if you want to look at it, is, I don't know if I'm connected to the internet, but it's, I really like this website, Swift Talks. I think you already know about this. And these guys are talking about like completely like really high level stuff, and they discuss these techniques, and they're very good techniques, but you have to be very, very careful, because they use a lot of closures, and closures calling closures, and all that stuff is going on. Sometimes I just don't understand what's going on even, but some of the things, if you like, especially their topic about the first one, basically the networking, I love that. This one, this is really, really good. I don't know if I have a transcript. So this is really good. They show you how to create a networking layer like this, and how to call networking, and how to minimize your code and to make it more reusable. Yeah. So this is a really good resource, but once again, this is super advanced stuff. Yeah.
My question is, when using interface builder, you have to like drag the button and connect it to a method. Usually, what I do is I put it out on my app's app controller.
Okay.
So, my question is, how would you use this with interface builder?
With interface builder, or like without interface builder?
With.
So I mean, we are using interface builder, like this one, right?
Yeah.
So I think most of the things, like the data source and all the code, so you can't really use interface builder at that point. One thing that you can use interface builder is to create your, where is that? The text box at the top. You can create those views, so you don't have to type all the code like text box and header view and all that. So let me show you over here. So this one, this guy over here, this, you can create an interface builder, and you can easily do that without writing any code. So let me see if I still remember how to do that. It's called supplementary views. Where's the view? Oh. UI view, I think you have to drag it over here. Oh. Yeah, you can somehow you can get this supplementary. Here we go. So this one you can replace. So this can become your text box view, and you can use interface builder to create a text box over here. You can change the color, and then you can use IB outlet to connect it to something over here. And once it's connected, then you don't need this code. You're just going to return that one. But then you have to keep track of text box delegates and all that stuff yourself.
Can
Yeah.
you use it in a different view controller?
No, you cannot use it in a different view controller. Supplementary views can only be used in one controller. Yeah. So unless you make a nib file, like an old nib file, and then you can use it, but if you want to go that route, yeah.
Okay.
Well, if I start to apply these techniques, what kind of errors can I to make starting? What kind of errors can I to see in my code?
If you're just starting out,
Yes.
I think if you're just starting out, then don't apply these techniques.
Well, not
Yeah.
straight up,
Uh-huh.
zero.
Uh-huh.
I would like to start with these techniques.
Mhm.
Yeah. What kind of errors can I?
Especially with this one, the completely generic table view data source and completely generic fetch results provider, sometimes you will run into scenarios where, yeah, I want that, but I want this thing also, like generic but not completely generic. Like, okay, I want to in this table view I want one section, but in this table view I want 4 sections, and this table view will have this one and little bit things. Then you have to think about your solution, that okay, when I develop this generic layer or generic table source, it was only when you have one section, but now you have 4 sections. How do I do that? Right? So you will run into, since it is called generic, it has to be very specific to, everyone should be able to use it. But sometimes if you have that narrow or edge case where yes, it's 90% there, but 10% has to be different, then where you will gonna hit like, okay, what do I do now? So things like that, yeah.
Okay, thanks. No, I have one more.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, what you're doing here is that you're trying to extract generic code.
Yeah.
And I've also seen best practices where you use extensions to just
Mhm.
make the view controller smaller. So I
Mhm.
would like to have my delegate, my table view delegate, my data source, my fetch view controller, they're all in different extensions.
Mhm.
Just what do you think of doing that just to get the code clean, because you don't make it more generic?
If you create like extension on a particular view controller, then it's not going to be, it's only for that view controller, I think, right? You can use those techniques, but I think in this one, this is not bound to any view controller, like the table view source kind of things. So this is for anything. So if I have to create a new grocery items table view controller, I can literally copy paste these 2 lines and change this to grocery item, and I'm done, and it will start working. I have seen some coding example. What they do is like this, which is, let me show you. So if I go over here and I say extension, what is that called? Shopping list table view controller, and they will go, let's go to, let's see if this will work. They do like, they copy it and then they paste it over here, which for me it doesn't make sense. I mean, just because you are extending the shopping list table view controller, you're not really, it's the same code, you just paste it in an extension.
Just separate.
Just a separate to Yeah, so maybe you can create a new file if you want to go that route. Extensions for data source, as you said, an extension for all the, yes. So you can do that. Yeah. No.
Do you think that for a developer that is starting to implement these techniques, can we make a mistake so making another class coding the same thing that is making another class but repeating or becoming redundant in the code?
Well, it depends, like what you are using. I think if you're using this, then I would not call it redundant, because it's, although you're using these same two lines, but swapping them with the model, like a grocery item over here, and the name of the table view cell, like different name, but you have encapsulated all the data source functions in the data source, right? So it's kind of like saying, if I have a screen that uses a text box and I have another screen that uses a text box, then if I use it in a different screen, it is redundant. But it's not, because it's a text box, it's a complete package kind of thing, right? But yes, if we go back to the old one, which is shopping list data source, then I go to a different screen, I have to create grocery items data source, it becomes redundant, right? But that has different advantages. If you create grocery item data source, it's completely independent of shopping list data source, and you can make adjustments over there without disturbing anything else. But now if I go and I make adjustments over here, then I have to be very, very careful, because this is used by everything. So if I do something bad over here, it's going to blow up, it's going to not work in all the screens, right? So that's why generic, although it's a very good thing, it's also, you have to be very, very careful. Yeah.
If I want to start to applying these techniques, what things I have to start to see in the code? What I have to identify in the code to start applying these techniques? If I let's say that I program, I coding code a really big ViewController, and I want to make it smaller. What things I have to see, or I can see at the beginning to build that?
So I think there's a saying like necessity is the what's the saying now? Necessity is the basically invention. When it's a necessity, is a mother of invention, right? So if I'm building table view, shopping list table view control, one screen, and I did all the code in one view controller, I'm done. I'm not going to change it. It's all bad, ugly code. Then I move to the next one, which is grocery items, which is this screen over here, this one, right? And then I'm like, okay, how is the user going to add an item? They need a text box, which, well, it's pretty much the same text box that I was using in the shopping list screen. So there you go. Like, I can make it reusable. So I extract that out into a separate file. Then you start working on, okay, I have these methods, like number of rows in section, number of sections, cell for row at index path. And once you start seeing that your code is repeating over and over again, then it's that time to stop and think about how you can make it better. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah. You always start with bad code. It's okay. Like you always start with just make it to work. Once it's working, then we say, okay, how can I improve it? Just like anything else in life, right? You always start with, Like if you are running for a marathon, you start with 1 mile, you run 1 mile, and they're like, okay, how can I improve running? Then you practice more, and then you run 2 miles, then 3, then you 26 miles in 6 months or so. But you keep improving at certain stages.
Okay,
right?
That's it. It's really a lot of practice.
It's practice. It's all practice. And one other thing I highly recommend is reading, like reading different blogs. And like when I was programming, there was there was no internet. I'm not that old, but there was no internet. So whenever we get a magazine, there was a code in the magazine. So we had to type it out. And that's what I always tell my students, that I know that you can copy paste the code from internet and yeah, it works. But no, don't copy paste it. See, and then type it out. So that always helps too. When you're typing, you're like thinking, okay, what's going on? So that always really helps. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, these techniques are based on any model, NPC, Spicker, NVDM?
For this?
Yeah.
For this one, it's like plain simple. So I'm not using Viper or anything, as you can see. I think the shopping list is, where is the shopping list control? Shopping list class is part of the core data auto-generated file. So I'm not using that. But if you want to use MVVM, you can definitely use it. It's going to clean out a lot of code for you. I'm waiting to use MVVM for when Swift will introduce custom attributes. Once it releases custom attributes, you should be able to write code like, and I don't even know if it's going to happen, but you can simply write code something like this. So you can have login view model, and you can have a property called var username string and var password string, and then you can say required, and then you can say required. This is not going to work because there is no such thing as required, all right? And I can't put this over there. But eventually, when they introduce this, maybe we can put this over here. We might even be able to do like this. And that will be really, really cool, because now when this login view model is rendered on the screen, it will automatically create text boxes for you. I mean, this is not going to work at all. This is all rubbish. But this is how in ASP.NET MVC, that's how they do it. So it is possible to do those things. Of course, they are working with HTML, and you actually have to go into HTML to type something like HTML, I don't remember now, for, and then you pass in x dot username, something like that, right, in C#. So we can do, or we can eventually be able to do these kind of things. But yes, if you want to use MVVM, you can definitely use it. It's a very nice, MVVM, yeah. But this is, of course, not going to work. But maybe in the future, because you can still have attributes, you can create attributes, right? I mean, you can have this attribute designable. So it is there, but we just cannot create our own attributes, which will be really cool. If we can create our own attributes, then I can simply populate, I can say, this is a required field, this is a required field, and then it will automatically validate. So that will be really cool, but it doesn't. So, yeah. All right, thank you.